Welcome to Wisdom Work, where we talk to people who are integrating their work selves with their spiritual journey. I am your host, Quanita Robertson. I work with the divine feminine to bring forgiveness and reconciliation to the world. I earn more than I want doing what I love in service to the highest good. In this podcast, we ask the question, which do you choose, change or transformational growth? The choice is yours. This choice will make the difference. This choice has the power to move you from stuck to inspired, from pain to joy, isolation to community, theory to practice, and from ordinary living to extraordinary living. Welcome. I'm here today with Nilima Bhat. She is the co-author of Shakti Leadership and a friend. I met Nilima in 2015, we figured out, in India. She was hosting a global conscious leadership summit and somebody invited me to come, and it's set off this 8-year friendship. And periodically we come and we touch in together, and we've done a couple of things. And so I'm really excited to be in this conversation with you today, Nilima, just to see what you're up to and to share you with listeners here. Nilima, welcome.
Oh, so nice to be with you, Juanita. And, you were saying we've done a few things together, but I was thinking meeting you has been such a beautiful stroke of good fortune, because we have connected you with other people in the Shakti Fellowship, and they've gone on to become good friends with you. And then somewhere I will hear, we did this with Juanita, and then someone else did something with Juanita. And I'm like, wow, it all began with you and I meeting. And then from there, look at all these connections that came out of it. And everyone speaks of you so fondly. So it just makes me really happy.
It's so funny because when I don't know if you know this story, but when I got invited to India, I had just just been divorced. And I was picking up my kids from school, and I got a call from a friend who said someone had contacted him and they had one space left, another room at the conference, and they asked him if he wanted to go. And he says, no, I can't go, but I think I know somebody who should go. And so he calls me, I'm in car pickup, and he says, I got this thing. If you're even interested in going to India, then I'll send you the information when I get home. And I said, okay. And I hung up the phone and I said, oh, well, nobody gets invited to India in car pickup. I'm not going to India. And then a month later, I'm in India. And so I just love the surprise of it, and I think that there's been surprise for me in our connections. And like you said, in the people that we're connected to as well. So welcome. What are some of the things that you've been up to lately? Let's share a bit.
A lot, Juanita. I separated from a 34-year marriage very amicably because I felt I had completed my duties as as a householder, and the children are grown up, settled, and now I can give myself fully to my mission. I have now been invited to join Tech Day Monterrey in Mexico, which is like the MIT of Mexico. And they have a program called Faculty of Excellence. And I just accepted an offer to join them as Distinguished University Professor.
Oh, congratulations.
For conscious women's leadership and personal and organizational transformation.
That's exciting. Congratulations. Yes. I'm excited to see what you do with that.
And lots of little things like that. I got awarded an honorary PhD by a university in India called Jharkhand University. I also got awarded the Indica Cultural Changemaker Fellowship for having initiated the Shakti Kumbh, which is like the world's first gathering for Shakti knowledge systems of the divine feminine in India. So it's just been all these things that I'm calling out have not been the awards or the PhD or even the offer to join Tech de Monterrey, interestingly, none of these three things were initiated by me. In the sense, it's not like I asked for this.
Yeah.
It's just come.
Yes.
And that's what just feels so so beautiful. I just feel so humbled and grateful, and just like, wow, like all these years of chipping away and just putting my head down and doing what my soul wants me to do, and really on a with no budget very often.
Yeah.
And then
Yes.
it, most, I would joke that about 20% of my time is paid work and 80% of my time is pro bono, because it's just passion and mission and purpose. But, I could afford to do it because in my marriage, we were well off, and I could do this,
Yeah.
but now suddenly it's like the universe just opened its doors and it's just flowing. It's so beautiful.
Beautiful. It is beautiful. A lot of those things too, this particular podcast is about people who have integrated their work selves with their spiritual selves. And it sounds like some of the things you're speaking of, and who I know you to be, is that you live in a way that you integrate those two things. How do you feel that that shows up in your life?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. There's such a backstory to that
Yes.
question. How much time do we have, Juanita? For example, even from before I was born, my mother was told by some astrologer who read her hand. He wasn't even an official astrologer. He was like her boss, who's, read her hand and then said, "Oh, you're going to have two children and you're going to get married to this man." And so everything came true. And then he said, "Your second child is like, she's a destiny child, right? She's got work in the world to do, right?" And I was told this by my mother from ever since I remember. So it kind of put this thing in my mind, like, I have to do something important,
Yeah.
And so I have had that sense of responsibility. And I came to my spiritual awakening very early, when my mother went through her breast cancer, and I was just in 10th grade. And I remember just praying to Ganesha, the elephant-headed god. And we were a very secular family growing up. My father was in the Navy, and so we didn't even know our caste or any such thing. You're just an Indian citizen. You don't even know your religion or anything. But I just had this kind of connection to Ganesha, and I remember I started praying, and then my mother never got her cancer back again. And then after that, my father had a near fatal car accident, and I just held on to Ganesha's photo and I just prayed. And by the time we reached there, he hadn't died, he survived. And guess what? That was 30 years ago, right? And suddenly I realized, whoa, this thing works, like
Yes.
you pray, and somehow there is a response to your faith. And so this thing kind of began, this sense of a higher power, or even higher powers that are very benign, that are benevolent, that you can enter into relationship with, and who support you along the way, to your sincere prayers and requests. And so yeah, at 32, I had an existential crisis around, who am I? What am I doing with my life? Surely there's more to life than earning a paycheck. And I was at the height of my corporate career. I was looking after corpcoms for 25 countries across Asia Pacific for ESPN, Star Sports. We were in Singapore. Like, I thought I ticked all the boxes. And then I just felt like a failure overnight. And that's because this incredible spiritual object came into my life. It's a Tibetan painting. It's called a tanka. And life went topsy-turvy, and it only set itself back right when I began my spiritual practice and path in yoga in right earnest. Right? And it's almost as if this was the classic hero's journey, heroic
Yes.
journey. There was a herald and this thing came and like, out of the mainstream life, go on your, magical journey into the underworld. And then my husband got colon cancer when I was 35, he was 40. The children were only 11 and 8 years old. We were in London at this time. So then this became a journey of his health and his recovery. And I went even deeper into yoga and understanding mind, body, spirit, right? And we moved to Hong Kong at this time, and Hong Kong University asked me to write a book on mind, body, spirit approaches to health and well-being using Chinese medicine principles, which are very based on the Tao, right? Which is a very spiritual ground of the Chinese system. And so I think very slowly but surely, I would say from the age of 35 or even sooner, 32, 33, I began my yoga journey, and I've never looked back. And slowly but surely, I started orienting my life, my lifestyle, my life stance, my life history, everything kind of started aligning to this deeper being, right? Call it the soul, call it the higher self, saying, who am I? Why am I here? How do I live out this destiny? And what is mine to do in the world? And the more I gave myself to that inner knowing and guidance and acting on that, the more the journey unfolded. And I wrote my first book, My Cancer is Me, The Journey from Illness to Wholeness. I wrote it with my husband based on all that we learned on holistic and integrative medicine for his recovery. So I set up a integrative medicine practice called Sampurna. I started in a clinical setting helping other cancer patients. So those case studies became that first book. Along the way, my awakening as a woman and kind of the discovery that somehow I was within the patriarchy, and the waking up to that was a pretty significant realization, and then beginning the journey to my own empowerment, coming into my own Shakti, my own feminine power. Then the book Shakti Leadership, right, which is about integrating feminine and masculine power in leadership, in life, at work, and everything that's come out of all that has just been a slow and steady alignment to my soul's guidance.
One of the things I love about kind of what you're speaking to is it's this piece about, I love, there's a quote by, in the book Embers, where the author, and I can't remembering his name right now, but he says, nothing in nature grows from the outside in. Everything grows from the inside out. And what I hear you speaking to is this inner growth that then, of course, fuels your work in the world and how you're able to support people in their own growth process. Yeah. And so speak a little to that. Yeah.
I realized what is my mission after I did 10 years of helping people through cancer. There was a very clear moment which said, you're done with this, and I even had a dream. My famous Barack Obama dream in the White House, where he asked me, what do you do? And I said, someone asked me, what do you do? And I said, I work for the empowerment of women and to bring the wisdom of India to the world. And then he cynically says, oh, you just do lip service to that. And I was like, no, I do it by changing one life at a time. And then he just gets emotional and gives me a hug and then asks me to dance. And it was such a sweet dream of the animus, claiming my purpose and all that. And so that was my mission, very clearly comes straight out of the psyche, right? And I followed this guidance. So today I would say my mission is to develop 100,000 women change makers by 2030 who will collaborate to create peace, prosperity, and beauty, innovate the new economy. Right? And so the Shakti Fellowship with University of San Diego and with Skolkovo in Russia and now Tec de Monterrey in Mexico. And it's just been steady, just how beautiful this thing has just unfolded by taking one step at a time and the next step and the next step, you know?
Yes. And, you know, one of the things that I've been in recently, and I hear this in your story, even if it wasn't literally said, but it's all the yeses to when things arise in the moment that you've been able to say, you know, whether, like you said, whether it's been paid work or whether it's been service work, it's the yeses that then build up to, because it's ultimately yes to spirit, right? that then allows for the flow of other things to come to you.
You know, it's interesting what you're saying. I don't know whether this is unusual, but that's just how I am and who I am. That when I start feeling a sense of stagnation from within, I start feeling a little stale. I start feeling a little same old, same old. There's a very deep impulse from within that says, break this down and move forward. You know, you can't stay here. Not this, not this. You have to move on, right? And then it's almost as if I precipitate some sort of a life-changing situation for myself, which then forces me to go ahead. Like the ground from under my feet is just taken away. So I have no choice but to move into the next thing, you know? And I realize I will it. I make it happen. I call it in, you know? Example, around the time I met you, just before I met you, I was in search for my next thing. And I remember going to Rishikesh and I going to the Ganga. And there was a moment I just knew I'm going to put both my feet into this holy river. And I'm going to take this vow like a pledge, you know, and say, Divine Mother, Ganga, you know, bear witness. You know, here I am, stepping both feet into my purpose. I'm not half in and half out, both feet. And please bear witness. And it's really like life unfolded from that moment. You know, to where I am today.
When I said the piece too about all the yeses, what came to me too is, and it also requires lots of no's, right? Because I know lots of people who can say yes to almost everything, but have trouble saying no. And what I hear you is listening to that part inside of you, though, that tells you which time is it for which.
I love that. You're so right. The yeses are as important as the no's, because it's very, very hard but necessary to say no to the status quo. Right? And to say no to what is now outdated. To say no that has served its time and no longer works. And it's a wasteland. And however comfortable, you've got to be able to say, no, thank you. I'm moving on.
And I think sometimes the no's, even to like, sometimes we have to, when life is abundant, we have to say no to good things even. You know, it's not just saying no to bad things, right?
Very much. In fact, those are called the golden handcuffs, right? That you have such a cushy life and, you know, everything's taken care of. And so, for example, I know when I made the decision to move into this separated self after 34 years of marriage, saying I'm going to move on, I had so many friends, both the husband and wife couples who I knew. It's almost like my decisions sent like a ripple across our community. It was like, whoa. Husbands started looking at their wives saying, are you going to do that too? You know, it's like, and many wives would say to me, Nilima, you're so brave. You're so brave that you're going out there on your own, because you worked so many years to invest in, you know, in the relationship and to have the cushy life. And And I know many women who would not leave their marriages because they have not financially secured themselves
Yeah.
to be sovereign and independent financially.
Yeah.
And so now those golden handcuffs, right? I mean,
Yes.
they
I
they don't know who they would be if they were to leave.
Yeah, I know. When I got divorced from my husband, he was an aerospace engineer and I hadn't secured myself financially. I just knew it was time to go,
Mm.
and so that leap, and I described it as it's like when you are a person in the community that serves as foundation, that when you shift, they experience an earthquake.
Yes.
And it's all these questions around their own marriage, like you spoke, and choices that they've made. It's like, if you can make this choice, and I've told myself I can't make the choice, what does that
Yes.
do for me? You know?
Yes.
And I also think there's a piece in our culture and the communities across around the world actually that knows that part of our jobs as community is to support people in their marriage. And I think there's a collective guilt that happens when a family, divorces, and we don't know how to tend to that as a community. And so often the way people tend to it is it's like there has to be somebody to blame, or there has to be, something wrong, instead of, no, this is the next place we go. This is who we are now. Yeah.
You know, Juanita, one reason I just so love you and love talking to you, that you're able to give voice and articulate such incredible depth and deep insights. And what you just said, that, when a foundational marriage in a community, which is what ours was, we were like the golden couple and the golden family. We kind of, it's like the redwoods, underneath,
Yes.
you may look independent, but underneath all the roots are kind of interconnected. And if one gets uprooted, somehow the whole forest experiences an earthquake, an uprooting of some sort. And then there is this thing of the community feeling, what didn't we do?
Yeah.
And I actually feel there's truth to that. I did feel, that what my husband and I went through after his cancer, and how incredibly difficult it was to cope with the trauma of that. And we just bravely batted on and, made it look good and did good, and so much good came out of it. But yeah, I actually feel the community actually did not support
Hmm.
um, in a way that may have been possible.
Yeah.
Right. And you're right in actually stating it. And but it is what it is.
Yeah.
Everyone is so busy with their own lives. Everyone is so stressed, just keeping their, head and body together,
Yeah.
that in today's life, people do not have time or even the sensitivity to perceive
Yes.
the needs of the community. And until something like this happens. And so, yeah, and yet, instead of wanting to blame anyone,
Yeah.
I decided not to blame. But yeah, I do wonder, how have I not shown up for others?
Hmm.
Uh, I should, if I felt the lack of genuine support, uh, then who am I not giving support to?
Yeah,
No.
one of the things that I feel I've been really blessed with is some wonderful elders in my life.
Mm.
And so there's been times in my life when, like when Steve's mother was dying, that one of
Mm.
my elders came to her and stayed in our house. She was,
Mm.
at that time, she was on the road. And so she came and stayed and took care of our children and cleaned our house and cooked so that we could go and be at the hospital anytime we needed, you know. Or like afterwards, she stayed in my mother-in-law's home while we were preparing it to sell it because insurance is so expensive if you don't have someone living in the house. So
Mhm.
those times, or when my mother died, she came, right? Like what and we just don't have those systems built
Mhm.
into our communities anymore. I call them the undocumented systems. It's like, who are the people who show up and who come or who know, where are the women that used to show up to take care of us? When my daughter was born, we did, I invited a different woman to come to be with me and my daughter and a toddler for 30 days because I said other cultures do a much better job of taking care of the moms. And then I had women who would call and say, I didn't get a day. It ended up being 45 days. These different women came through to help tend to us. And it was hard for me to allow them to do it, even though I had invited them in. Right. So, like, even like in those spaces, not only, I think the question for me often is not only where have I not shown up, but where
Mhm.
haven't I even been able or willing to let someone show up for me?
So as you speak, I feel in the early days of my husband's cancer, when the kids were really young, actually we had just overwhelming, like a tsunami of support. It was beautiful. Everything that you're describing. Father Lancy came and stayed 20 days with us in London and taught us everything we now know about integrative medicine and, being a PhD in science, microbiology, and etc. It's more towards like more recently in the last couple of years where I did reach out to a few people and I just felt for whatever reason, and therefore I have a sense of destiny, and sometimes there's a mystery, right? Like
Mhm.
that I realize this was not meant to be saved.
Mhm. Yes.
And that is why, even though I reached out for help, it didn't come.
Yes.
I feel talking about following your soul guidance, I feel I needed to go on this separation.
Yes.
And I've been doing some Jungian studies around the idea of alchemy,
Mhm.
right? And the whole thing about psychological alchemy is when there are these polarities in a relationship, and these are opposites that either attract each other in love or then they attack each other in war, right? And
Mhm.
this is the anima animus in each other, and that
Yeah.
base level metal goes on, right? Like lead goes on. But then the time comes where you have to separate the elements of a compound.
Mhm.
And so that each element can be purified to its next level. And then those two new purified elements can come together
Mhm.
in a whole new compound, which is gold,
Yeah.
right? So I even had a dream that foretold this
Mhm.
when we were in Hong Kong, and my husband's cancer had just been diagnosed. Maybe it was a year or 2 years, and I saw this coming. I knew the cancer set in motion
Yeah.
this process, and in my dream I saw we were on a train, and the train is going straight to the ocean,
Mm.
and my husband, my son, my daughter, and I are on the train, and many people are getting off at stops along the way and just kind of swimming in these large pools. But the four of us are not going to get off at these pools because we are waiting for the real deal, which is the ocean.
Yeah.
Okay. And then at some point we lose each other.
Mm.
And there's a moment of panic or confusion or sadness or grief, or like, oh, where are we? Where is the other? I even saw my daughter holding on to the rails of the window from the outside, and but very determinedly holding on. And
Yeah.
this is when she was barely 9 years old or
Yeah.
something, like, and my son must have been barely 12 when I had this dream. And then we find each other.
Mm.
We find each other, and there is this moment of just the joy of reunion, especially after you thought you had lost each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then you find each other, there's a sense of joy, and like, oh, we're headed to the ocean,
Yes.
and we're together, and we're getting to the ocean, right? So for me, that's such a archetypal dream, this idea of the ocean being the ocean of full consciousness, and not, stopping and getting off before we reach
Yes.
the big goal. And that we may lose each other, we may get separated, but that too is part of the journey.
Yes.
So I'm actually thinking maybe after 34 years of being married, the next step, and of course my separation has impacted my relationship with my two children, adult children now, right? So even that is now being reworked and renegotiated, and there's grief there, and it's just love trying to find its way.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
But it's almost as if we can't have got from where we were to where we can be without having separated.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a point in my marriage that I was really clear. It was like, it was felt like spirit was so seductive and calling me someplace. And I call him my husband, but my husband at that point couldn't go to where I was being called to.
Yes.
And I couldn't continue to carry him in the way that I was and go to where I was being called.
Yes.
And it was excruciating. It was because I wanted both, but that wasn't our journey. That wasn't, and there was this piece in me too that felt like, I had this feeling, because I grow really quickly, that I leave people behind. And spirit was really clear with me that you can't leave anybody behind, because it's not your choice whether they come or not.
Mm-hmm.
He had the choice to come, but that's not what he was choosing,
Mm-hmm.
And so that wasn't his route. and I still had to go. Yeah.
And that the partner not choosing where you are going is no judgment on them at all.
Not at all.
They just have a different journey.
Yes. Because we all get to choose. We all have choice and free will in that way. And it does change. So whenever there's any kind of a death, and that's a death, we're different, which changes every relationship we're part of. I would say then has to be renegotiated, because we're the common denominator.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm going through right now with my son and my daughter.
Yes.
Right? Renegotiating who are we to now be with each other. What is this new relationship?
One realization I've had recently too is this whole idea of growing pains. It's like the growth happens first. And then the growing pains, it's usually like the renegotiation of who you already are now. Because then it's like we have to figure out then how do we be together, because the way that was comfort before doesn't work anymore. And that can be painful, Yeah. So what are some hopes that you have moving forward?
It's interesting, that question, because at 56, my deepest desire, which has been with me for a long time, is to be a Jivan Mukta Karma Yogi, with the ability to heal every life I touch, which is, I really want to be what's called like the Bodhisattva, or someone who's in the world but not of the world. And therefore, to have that sufficient level of witness consciousness to what happens. So it's like the famous Zen story of good thing, bad thing, who knows, right? So instead of swinging between a high and then, then as night follows day, you will experience the low. And I'm kind of done with this swing between the great highs with the inevitable lows. So I would rather step back and just abide in the bliss of my own being. right? Which is just a quiet, deep joy,
Mm-hmm.
which is a very different biochemical feeling uh, from the high that you get when you get good news and,
Yes.
you jump around and you feel excited, which is lovely. But then after that comes something that gets you low, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think my hope now is how much can I abide in the bliss of my own being?
Mm. Yeah. Beautiful. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want to speak to here?
Oh gosh. No, all I'll say is to anyone who's listening that really just if you can find what spirit is asking of you, what your soul is inviting you to, say yes, because
Mm.
it's the greatest ride you can ever have. You know,
Yes.
it's so, so joyful. You feel so congruent. You feel so aligned with who you are and where you're going. And, it's just such a big yes.
Mm.
I can't imagine not living a life aligned without, like how can I not do what my soul or spirit asks me to do?
Yeah.
Why would I not do it? Because there's nothing better than this.
Yes. Yes. Well, yes, and I would say I think one of the things that sometimes we miss in this culture is it's not easy, right? In this journey. I think it's worth it, but I don't think it's an easy walk.
There's that famous quote, right? I think it's Annie Nin. And the day came when the risk of remaining tight in the bud was
Yeah.
greater than the risk of blossoming.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I love that. Um and I just say that because I think, mm, in some ways, because we've sold this spiritual journey to people so often that and that it's sunshine, so many people sell it as sunshine and rainbows. And I always say it's like, no, you just keep qualifying for more trouble, right? um but it is worth it because the responsibility is always, always, always comes with gifts and privileges and the understanding of both. Yeah.
When we met in Oro Valley, I don't know if you remember the founder, his name is Swami Brahmdev.
Yeah.
And we were celebrating, when I met him first, he was celebrating 25 years of having created this beautiful center with so much challenge, okay? But here was his center. Like he's like, hey, you are who I want to be when I grow up, right?
Yeah.
To have a center like this.
Yes.
So I remember asking him the question, it's 25 years. Look what you've created. What a beautiful space. And how are you feeling? What's the view like on the summit of 25 years? And he smiled and he said, you think when you get here, the mother will give you chocolates? Like the divine mother gives you chocolates. And no, you're just given the next higher level of challenge.
Yes. Yes. Oh, well, thank you, thank you, thank you for your yes in this. And what we'll do with the podcast is we'll post your contact information and kind of what you're up to so people can find you and get in touch and support the work that you're doing in the world. Thank you again, Nilima. I appreciate
Thank you. It's always such a joy.
I agree.